What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So League of Legends currently has 10 free champions still, and 10 champions is actually the exact same amount of free champions that were in the game from the very start. You know, back at the launch of League of Legends, there were 40 champions in the game, and at the time, you could still play 10 champions for free each week. Now, today, the game has 132 champions at the time of making this video, so the amount of champions in the game has more than tripled since release, but the amount of free champions has stayed the same. And it's worth definitely bringing up the idea that maybe Riot should increase the amount of free champions, and let's break it down and take a look at what this might entail. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't, feel free to hit the dislike because it's right next to it. So let's get started. And a great way to start out this discussion is probably just to look at, what's in it for Riot, because that's really what matters at the end of the day. Like, that's what's going to affect the decision the most. And first up, free champions are a great advertising tool. It's kind of like a demo for a video game, right? Like, you give someone a taste and they just keep coming back for more. Like, product demonstration is a really big, really powerful, and honestly just a really popular way to market a product. And in this case, that product is champions. Why do you think you see those ladies give out free samples at Costco? Or why does every subscription site online, heck, every site that I'm sponsored by, give you a free trial? It's because giving you a free trial is something that helps increase sales. It's because it's a lot easier to convince someone to try something than it is to convince them to buy it. And if your product is already really good in the first place, a lot of people are going to try it and then like it and then decide to buy it, whereas they might have just ignored it completely if there wasn't a free trial. So by increasing the number of free champions, it's very possible that that could help Riot sell more champions overall, and as a result, it seems like they do have a reasonable business incentive to do so. But what about the drawbacks from Riot's perspective? Well, it is possible that Riot believes that 10 champions is just flat out enough to where it's already enough of a selection at any given week for every player to just already have something to try out, to where increasing the number of champions wouldn't actually increase sales at all, since players already have that sort of demo, they already have that group of stuff to try out, and to where giving them more stuff to try out, sure might be nice, but it would have no major impact on sales whatsoever. And if the number of free champions is already high enough in the eyes of Riot, according to, like their sales data, their statistics, and all that good stuff, and at that point, increasing the number of free champions could potentially hurt sales for them actually, because people might actually be less inclined to buy champions overall now that they have a bigger access to being able to play the champions in the game for free. You could argue games that give free or cheap access to heroes like maybe Smite or Dota have been honestly less successful than Riot in turning a profit from their business models overall. So it might just be the case that Riot kind of just doesn't want to change what's already working for them. And it's a little bit difficult to know since we of course don't know their actual statistics behind the fact, but it does seem like there could be a little bit of a conflict of interest there. What's in it for the actual players of League of Legends? Well, League is definitely meant to be a free-to-play game, and a lot of the time you just end up having to wait as much as like 6 to 8, sometimes even 10, 12 weeks just to try out that one champion you wanted to play. So increasing the amount of champions that is free each week could very much, help shorten that window at least. And I personally would love to see the fact that you can expect to be able to try out any champion in a month or something like that, and you can't really depend on influence points to fuel a player's desire to just play champions in specific roles or styles or whatever. And as a player, you're kind of just stuck hoping that your champion's going to end up on a free week unless you kind of just want to open your wallet. And trying new champions is definitely one of the most fun things about the game for a lot of people, myself included, and making that easier is something that could definitely help make the game a little bit more fun overall, and as a result also help keep people playing it for a little bit longer, which is something that Riot of course wants. And it honestly could also be a very nice tool to help for the new players in the game. When you start out playing League, it's actually really lame how you have such an incredibly small champion pool to work with. And this can really increase the barrier to entry by quite a decent amount, in the sense that, a player might have or play against a champion that they really like, but then you kind of just end up feeling disappointed because you can't actually play that champion for free, and it requires some sort of investment at that point. And in the same kind of sense, something that's also a little bit underappreciated is that something like this could actually help make the game more competitive. And it sounds a little bit weird to think about, but by giving players the option to have more champions and just to try more champions in general, you kind of just like indirectly reduce the barrier between casual play and competitive play almost. Because the thing is that being able to play multiple champions is something that you ideally should be able to do to play the game at the competitive level, right? And I'm going to pull up something from the history books here, because Scarra said in an interview about 4 years ago, actually, that he thought that at the time the number of free champions should be increased because it makes entering the actual competitive part of League of Legends a little bit easier. And Scarra definitely agrees with the idea that more free champions does actually help make the game a little bit more competitive. And, you know, he said that 4 years ago, so it's definitely still the case today, much more so now that more time has passed and more champions have been released. And this is the kind of thing that could help things out in this category a lot more than you might expect. You know, think about it like this, you know, if you want to be competitive in a game like Hearthstone, for example, you have to buy like just a crap ton of packs just to get enough of a collection to get started. And the same kind of goes for League in a sense. Even if you kind of one-trick a pony, or you just main a champion, or maybe you play like one niche group of champions like mid lane mages or something, you still really do have a lot of champions that you need to buy before you can learn them all and experience them and get some sort of like practice and better understanding of the champions. And especially in terms of like playing at the absolute highest level, that is something you just cannot do playing only one champion. You know, if you're playing at the absolute highest level of League, you have to play multiple champions. Otherwise, you're just not going to be competitive. And having more free champions each week actually does help that out quite a lot. Now, I did mention that this is something that could possibly be nice for newer players, but it's actually also possible that this kind of thing might be bad for new players. And hear me out here, because it's almost to the point where having too many choices when you're kind of like fresh out and learning the game and doing all sorts of stuff just as a beginner can be a little bit overwhelming. You know, for a lot of new players, the amount of stuff you have to learn when you start playing League, you know, just to not be a beginner anymore, honestly, is just crazy. Like, the barrier to entry is honestly insane. And although I can't say for sure, I personally don't think this is a big deal, but Riot might have stats that show that by increasing the number of free champions, it actually does make it a little bit more difficult for newer players, because it gives them too many choices and they kind of get stuck and confused trying out all the different champions. Now, I don't personally think this is the case at all. Like, I think this is something you can just completely ignore, because I believe that anything more than, honestly, like 2 champions has this effect with newer players. Like, newer players already get overwhelmed by having the option of 10 champions anyway, so increasing it might not actually hurt them at all, or at least not hurt them all that much more than having 10 champions already does. So those are kind of like the pros and cons for both Riot's perspective and the players' perspectives that we could come up with. Now, based on the statistics and what things could entail, and especially the sales numbers and the marketing tools that Riot has, it's hard to know for sure how meaningful the cons of increasing the number of free champions actually would be. But the thing is that even if the cons were impactful, I would honestly still believe that the pros in general outweigh the cons, and the fact that the cons might not even matter at all, or just not be all that impactful, really just makes me think that this is something that I would love to see come to the game. You know, having 14, 16, honestly even like 20 free champions each week would be really awesome. At least to have this be something that, you know, starts to get discussed and taken into consideration. Like, I want this to be a topic that people talk about so we can actually see it happen in the future, and I would really love to see it become a reality. It might be tough though, because this is something that Riot probably has to study statistics for, and player patterns, and do all sorts of research and things that you wouldn't even imagine they have to do before actually implementing something like this. So it's a little bit tricky to know, but I do believe there are a lot of good reasons for Riot to want to do this and for the players to want to have this. So overall, it's something that I really want to see come to the game in the future. And yeah, I mean, hopefully we can just make it happen. Anyway, looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like. If you didn't enjoy the video, drop a dislike. Subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.